Welcome to Silent Queen's Reckoning. I'm so glad you could join us today. Now let's dive right into the story.
The first thing Amelia Hart noticed was not her ex-husband. It was the way his mistress laughed while touching Amelia's father's wrist. The restaurant was quiet in the expensive way, all white linen, low voices, and sunlight slipping through tall windows onto glasses that cost more than some people's weekly groceries. Amelia had come to return a signed foundation document to her father before his flight to Boston. She did not expect to see Grant Whitaker sitting at the corner table. She did not expect to see Serena Vale beside him in a cream dress, her hand resting too comfortably near Richard Hart's watch. She did not expect Grant to look up, recognize her, and smile like a man who believed the room belonged to him. "Amelia," he said. Her name left his mouth with false surprise. Serena turned. For one bright second, the other woman looked startled. Then her expression softened into pleasure. Not kindness. Opportunity. "Oh," Serena said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "this is awkward." Amelia stood beside the hostess stand with a leather folder in one hand and her phone in the other. Her father, Richard Hart, sat across from Grant and Serena with a half-finished espresso in front of him. He looked at Amelia. Only once. No panic. No apology. Only a small, steady look that told her he had seen the whole shape of the moment before anyone else understood they were in it. Grant stood. He wore a charcoal suit Amelia bought him 3 years ago for his first investor pitch. He had kept the suit after the divorce, along with 2 watches, 1 antique desk, and the talent for making borrowed things look earned. "I did not know you came here," he said. Amelia looked at his chair. "I did not know you could afford it." Grant's smile tightened. Serena laughed. "Still sharp," she said. "I suppose bitterness has to go somewhere." Amelia said nothing. That always bothered Serena. The mistress had expected tears after the affair came out. She expected public screaming, broken glasses, shaking hands, dramatic revenge. Instead, Amelia had called a lawyer, moved out of the house she had quietly owned before marriage, and stopped answering messages that did not arrive through counsel. Silence had offended Serena more than anger would have. Now Serena looked from Amelia's tailored black dress to Richard's silver hair and calm face. Her mouth curved. "Wait," she said. "Are you here with him?" The restaurant seemed to lean closer. Grant's eyes flicked to Richard. Richard lifted his espresso and said nothing. Serena's smile widened. "Grant, look," she moved on fast. Amelia heard the words before they finished forming. She knew exactly where Serena was going. She had spent 2 years listening to this woman disguise cruelty as innocence. At corporate dinners, Serena had called Amelia so practical in a tone that made practical sound like unfeminine. At the company holiday party, she had told 3 people Amelia was lucky Grant liked loyal women. During the divorce, she had posted, "Some women marry ambition and then punish it for growing beyond them." Amelia had saved that. She saved everything. Serena tilted her head toward Richard. "I did not know you had found a sugar daddy." The sentence landed. Grant gave a soft laugh into his water glass. Several people at the next table looked down quickly. Amelia felt heat move up her neck. Not shame. Recognition. There it was. The same old trick. Humiliate her first. Make her defend herself. Call her unstable if she reacted. Call her cold if she did not. Richard set down his espresso. The tiny sound of porcelain against saucer seemed louder than Serena's laugh. Amelia turned toward him. She did not raise her voice. She did not explain. She only said one word. "Dad." Grant stopped smiling. Serena's hand froze on the edge of the table. The waiter standing near the wine station looked up. Richard Hart leaned back in his chair and looked at Serena with the kind of calm that made powerful people dangerous. "Yes, Amelia?" For 3 seconds, nobody at the table moved. Then Grant looked from Richard to Amelia. "Dad?" His voice cracked on the word. Amelia placed the leather folder beside Richard's espresso. The revised grant approvals, she said. You asked me to sign before your flight. Richard opened the folder. Thank you. Serena's face had gone pale under her makeup. Grant sat down slowly, as if his knees had forgotten how to hold him. Richard turned one page, then looked at Grant. Mr. Whitaker, when my daughter walked in, you allowed your companion to call me her sugar daddy. Grant swallowed. Mr. Hart, I had no idea. That she was my daughter? I mean, she never told me. Amelia almost smiled. Never told me. Grant's favorite defense. He had not known the house was hers because she never made a performance of the deed. He had not known the investment introductions came through her father's foundation network because she never demanded credit. He had not known Serena's hotel charges looked suspicious because Amelia never explained how expense reports worked. He had not known the divorce would cost him because Amelia never warned him that patience had an end. Richard looked at him for a long moment. You were married to her for 6 years. Grant's jaw tightened. She used her mother's surname. She used her name, Richard said. You failed to ask what it meant. Serena's hand slid from the table into her lap. Mr. Hart, she said softly, I am so sorry. I thought... Richard turned his eyes to her. You thought an insult was safe. The color in Serena's cheeks vanished completely. Amelia picked up her phone. She had not planned to record lunch. But she had started the recorder the moment Serena said the word awkward. Her attorney had taught her that public cruelty often became useful when allowed to finish speaking. Grant noticed the phone. Are you recording this? Yes. His face changed. Amelia, this is a private business lunch. Not anymore. Richard closed the folder. It stopped being private when your guest insulted my daughter in a public dining room. Grant leaned forward. Mr. Hart, please, this is a misunderstanding. Richard's expression did not change. The word sugar daddy is not difficult to understand. Serena's eyes shone. I apologized. Amelia looked at her. No, you explained that you were sorry after you learned he was my father. That is different. Serena looked down. Richard turned to Grant. I believe our meeting is over. Grant's panic flashed openly now. Mr. Hart, the acquisition proposal deserves to be considered separately from personal history. Amelia's fingers tightened around her phone. Acquisition proposal. So that was why Grant was here. 3 months after the divorce, Grant's company was already looking for rescue. And he had come to Amelia's father without knowing whose daughter he had discarded in public. Richard smiled faintly. Personal history is often where a man's business ethics first reveal themselves. Grant's mouth opened. No sound came. Richard stood. Amelia saw several diners pretend not to watch. Amelia, he said, walk with me. She did. She did not look back until they reached the front of the restaurant. When she turned, Grant was still seated, staring at the table. Serena held her napkin in both hands. For once, neither of them had a line prepared. Outside, the noon air was bright and cold. Richard's driver stood beside the black car at the curb. Amelia stopped under the awning. For 7 seconds, she stayed perfectly still. Then her hands began to shake. Richard saw. He did not touch her immediately. He knew his daughter well enough to ask permission with his eyes. Amelia stepped toward him. Only then did he put an arm around her shoulders. I am sorry, he said. Amelia's laugh came out broken. For what? Being mistaken for my sugar daddy? For inviting them to lunch before telling you. She looked up. You knew Grant was coming? I knew Whitaker Development requested a meeting through Langford Capital. I did not know until this morning that your ex-husband was the founder attached to the proposal. And Serena? I knew she was listed as Chief Brand Officer. Amelia closed her eyes. Serena had been Grant's communications director during the marriage. Then his mistress. Then his public girlfriend. Now Chief Brand Officer. Titles grew so quickly when watered with betrayal. Richard continued. I was going to tell you after I reviewed the materials. I did not want to reopen a wound unnecessarily. Dad! I know. He sounded tired. Not of her. Of men who made his daughter need lawyers before she needed peace. There is something else, Richard said. Amelia opened her eyes. What? Their proposal included assets they may not own. The shaking in Amelia's hand stopped. What assets? Richard studied her face. A waterfront development package in Redwood Harbor. It references zoning approvals, design studies, and investor contacts that look familiar. The street noise seemed to thin. Those were mine. I thought so. 2 years earlier, Amelia had developed the Redwood Harbor concept while still married to Grant. It was not a simple real estate project. It was a mixed-use coastal restoration and housing plan designed through her family foundation's Urban Resilience Initiative. Amelia spent 14 months coordinating environmental studies, affordable housing commitments, and preliminary architecture. Grant had called it a hobby. Then, after the divorce, several files disappeared from the shared home office. He said she must have misplaced them. She had not accused him. She had made copies. Of course she had made copies. Amelia looked back through the restaurant window. Grant was standing now, speaking rapidly into his phone. Serena was leaning close, face tight. He brought Redwood Harbor to you? Under the name Whitaker Landing. Amelia let out a slow breath. The insult in the restaurant was not the story. It was the doorway. Richard's voice softened. Do you want to handle it quietly? For a moment, Amelia saw the 6 years of marriage in small cuts. Grant introducing her as the practical one while taking credit for her contacts. Serena asking whether Amelia ever felt insecure being married to such a visionary man. Grant's mother telling Amelia that ambitious men needed women who admired them, not women who audited them. The divorce dinner where Grant said leaving her had saved his future. The lunch. Sugar daddy. Dad. Amelia looked at her father. No, she said. I want to handle it correctly. Richard nodded once. Then we start with records. Her attorney, Mara Chen, was in court when Amelia called. She returned the call 12 minutes later. Amelia sat in the back of Richard's car with the restaurant recording saved in 3 places. Tell me only the actionable facts first, Mara said. That was why Amelia liked her. Mara did not begin with comfort. She began with structure. Amelia told her. Grant and Serena at lunch with Richard Hart. The sugar daddy insult. The recording. The acquisition proposal. Redwood Harbor repackaged as Whitaker Landing. Mara was silent for several seconds. Then she said, Do not contact Grant. Do not contact Serena. Send me the recording, the proposal if your father can share it, and every file you have on Redwood Harbor. I have everything. Good. Where are the originals? Foundation archive, my laptop, external drive, and the cloud. Of course they are. Amelia almost smiled. Was that admiration? Professional relief. Mara's tone sharpened. Also, Amelia, expect a public attack. Already? He was humiliated in front of a man whose capital he needs. He will try to get ahead of it. Mara was right. By 4:30, Serena posted first. Some women weaponize family money when they cannot stand seeing an ex succeed. No names. Plenty of meaning. By 5 o'clock, Grant reposted an article about founders surviving personal attacks. By 5:20, Grant's mother, Elaine Whitaker, wrote a paragraph. My son gave 6 years to a cold marriage and now faces sabotage from people who think wealth means power over everyone else. Truth will come. Amelia sat at her dining table and read the posts once. She did not reply. She took screenshots. Her phone buzzed with messages from mutual friends. Is this about you? Did you really show up at his investor lunch? Why was your dad meeting him? Did Grant steal your project? She answered none of them. At 6:12, Grant texted. You made a fool of me today. Screenshot. At 6:14, another. You never told me Richard Hart was your father because you wanted to trap me. Screenshot. At 6:16. If you go after Whitaker Landing, I will make sure people know exactly how unstable you were during our marriage. Amelia stared at the word unstable. There it was. The favorite shelter of men who feared documentation. She forwarded the messages to Mara. Mara replied quickly. Let him continue if he wants. Do not engage. Grant continued for 37 minutes. He accused her of jealousy. He accused her of using her father. He accused her of never supporting his dreams. He accused her of trying to ruin Serena because Serena was younger, warmer, and more in tune with his vision. He did not deny using Redwood Harbor. Not once. That omission told Mara where to press. The next morning, Mara sent a preservation letter to Grant, Serena, Whitaker Development, Elaine Whitaker, and 3 consultants listed on the acquisition proposal. The letter demanded preservation of all communications, drafts, pitch decks, file transfers, investor materials, design documents, zoning reports, environmental studies, and client lists related to Redwood Harbor, Whitaker Landing, or any project derived from Amelia's work. It also warned against destroying digital records. Grant called within 8 minutes. Amelia did not answer. He called again. She let it ring. Serena texted, "You are proving every terrible thing he said about you." Screenshot. Elaine called Richard's office. Richard did not take the call. At 10:30, Langford Capital formally suspended review of Whitaker Development's proposal pending ownership clarification. At 10:46, Grant emailed Amelia, "You are interfering with my business relationships." Mara replied, "Please direct all communications to counsel." At 11:03, Grant sent the same email to Richard. Richard forwarded it to Mara without comment. By noon, a local business blog posted a small piece. Whitaker Development acquisition talks, paused amid founder divorce dispute. Serena's hand was obvious in every sentence. The article called Amelia an heiress. It called Grant self-made. It described Redwood Harbor as a visionary coastal project developed under Whitaker's leadership. Amelia read that sentence twice. Then she opened her archive. She found the first Redwood Harbor sketch dated 20 months before Grant had ever mentioned coastal development in a meeting. She found emails to environmental scientists. She found the first budget. She found meeting notes in her own handwriting. She found a voice memo from Grant. At the time, he had been laughing. "I do not understand why you are wasting your nights on a seaside charity village, Ames. But if it makes you happy, go save the fish." Amelia listened to that recording once. Then she sent it to Mara. The insult had aged into evidence. 2 days later, Amelia met Mara and Richard in a private conference room at Hart Foundation. On the wall, a large screen displayed 2 project decks side by side. Redwood Harbor. Whitaker Landing. The first slide in Grant's deck used a different logo. The second used the same coastline. The third used Amelia's projected zoning timeline with colors changed. The fourth used her community benefits language almost word for word. The fifth used her environmental resilience diagrams, stripped of the foundation watermark. Mara stood with her arms crossed. "This is not inspiration, this is copying." Richard's face was very still. Amelia knew that stillness. It appeared when he was angrier than he wanted the room to know. "How did he access the files?" Richard asked. Amelia opened the next folder. "Home office desktop, during the marriage, but after the separation, someone logged into my old shared drive from Grant's office." Mara looked at her. "You have the logs?" "Yes." "Of course you do." Richard almost smiled. Mara moved to the next file. "There is also possible investor misrepresentation. He pitched these assets as company-owned. If he used foundation studies or your materials without authorization, investors have a problem." "So what happens?" "First, we seek an injunction. Second, we notify the consultants whose work was reused. Third, we review whether any public claims are defamatory. Fourth, your father decides whether Langford Capital reports concerns to other parties who received the deck. Richard said, Langford will report. Mara nodded. Good. Amelia looked at the 2 decks on the screen. For 6 years, Grant had told her she was too cautious, too attached to details, too worried about records, too interested in old emails. Now every detail stood in a row like witnesses waiting to be sworn in. The injunction hearing was set for the following week. Grant arrived with Serena, Elaine, and a lawyer whose shoes were louder than his argument. Amelia arrived with Mara and 1 banker box of records, although most of the evidence was digital. Richard did not sit beside her. He sat in the gallery, 3 rows back. Not as a rescue, as a witness. That mattered to Amelia. She had spent years being accused of hiding behind her father's money by people who spent that money through the side door. This time she stood at the front with her own name on the filings. Grant's attorney argued that Whitaker Landing was an independent business concept developed after the divorce. He argued that coastal redevelopment was a broad idea. He argued that Amelia was attempting to punish her ex-husband because she saw him at lunch with his new partner. Mara stood. She did not begin with the lunch. She began with dates. Your Honor, the plaintiff began documenting the Redwood Harbor concept in March of the previous year, while it was part of Hart Foundation's Urban Resilience Initiative. We have dated drafts, consultant invoices, environmental reports, zoning correspondence, and design files. She placed the timeline on the screen. Whitaker Development's deck appeared 18 months later after Mr. Whitaker accessed a shared drive containing Miss Hart's files. Grant's attorney objected to the characterization. Mara changed the slide. This is the login record. This is the IP address associated with Whitaker Development's office. This is the downloaded folder name. This is the modified version appearing in the Whitaker deck. The judge leaned forward. Serena looked at Grant. Grant stared straight ahead. Mara continued. The language is not merely similar. The defendant's deck repeats typographical errors from Ms. Hart's internal draft. That changed the room. Not dramatically. No one gasped. But the judge's pen stopped moving. Mara highlighted a sentence. Affordable housing transition zone shall be phased through municipal and community trust alignment. Community. 1 missing M. Amelia remembered typing it at 1:12 in the morning while half asleep. The typo appeared in Grant's deck too. Grant's attorney began flipping pages. Serena closed her eyes. Mara turned to the next exhibit. We also have a voice recording from Mr. Whitaker during the marriage, dismissing the project as Miss Hart's Seaside Charity Village. The recording establishes that he knew the project was hers before he later represented it as his company's asset. Grant whispered something to his attorney. The attorney looked pained. The judge granted a temporary injunction preventing Whitaker Development from marketing, selling, licensing, or seeking investment based on Whitaker Landing materials until ownership could be resolved. He ordered preservation of all related files. He warned Grant against public misrepresentation. The ruling took 20 minutes. The damage took less. Outside the courtroom, Serena pulled Amelia aside near the hallway windows. Mara stepped closer. Amelia raised one hand. It is fine. Serena's face was tight. Are you happy? Amelia looked at her. No. The answer seemed to confuse Serena. You got what you wanted. I wanted my work not to be stolen. Grant built that company. With my introductions, my unpaid labor, and now my project files. Serena's eyes flashed. You always act like you are above everyone. No, I act like I took notes. Serena looked toward the courtroom doors. He said you never cared about his dreams. Amelia let that sentence pass through her slowly. Grant had dreams. She had funded them, edited them, hosted dinners for them, called investors for them, smiled beside him while he described them as if they appeared fully formed from his genius. Then, when her own work had shape, he took that too. Serena, Amelia said, if he needed to steal mine, maybe his dreams were not enough. Serena slapped her. The sound cracked down the hallway. For 1 second, everyone froze. Mara was already moving. Amelia did not lift a hand to her cheek. She did not hit back. She looked at the security camera above the hallway, then at Serena. "Thank you," she said quietly. Serena's face changed. She understood too late. The hallway had cameras. There were witnesses. The injunction had just been granted. Now the mistress who claimed Amelia was unstable had assaulted her outside court. Mara called security. Grant rushed from the courtroom. "What happened?" Serena began crying. "She provoked me." Amelia finally touched her cheek. It stung. Her voice stayed calm. "She hit me." Grant looked at Serena, then at Amelia, then at Mara, then at the camera. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the world had become less friendly to his version of events. The hallway report became part of the record. Serena was not arrested, but the incident destroyed the public narrative she had spent days building. The business blog updated its article. Footage requested after court hallway altercation in Whitaker development dispute. By evening, someone leaked the lunch story. Not Amelia. Not Richard. Probably a diner from the next table who had waited just long enough to become dramatic. The headline spread faster than the injunction. Founder and mistress mock ex-wife's sugar daddy at lunch, learn he is her father and potential investor. Amelia hated the word mistress in headlines. Not because it was untrue. Because it made the story sound smaller than it was. Affair stories were easy for people to consume. Theft required attention. Mara agreed. "We correct the focus." The next morning, Hart Foundation issued a statement. Amelia Hart developed the Redwood Harbor Initiative under Foundation archives before her divorce from Grant Whitaker. Any use of foundation materials, consultant work, community benefit language, design diagrams, or related intellectual property without authorization is subject to legal review. The matter is not a romantic dispute. It concerns ownership, misrepresentation, and misuse of protected materials. No adjectives. No outrage. No sugar daddy. It worked. Investors began calling Whitaker development. Consultants whose work appeared in Grant's deck sent their own letters. The city planning office requested clarification. Langford Capital formally withdrew interest. 2 days later, Elaine Whitaker posted again. Some families use power to crush men who dare to start over. Amelia saved it. Mara sent Elaine a letter. The post came down within an hour. Grant tried to negotiate quietly after that. He requested mediation. Mara accepted with conditions. Full disclosure of all Redwood Harbor materials. Identification of every investor who received the Whitaker landing deck. Written admission that Amelia and Hart Foundation owned the original project materials. Compensation for unauthorized use. Permanent non-use agreement. Grant refused the admission. Then discovery began. Discovery was not glamorous. It was not a dramatic courtroom reveal every day. It was emails, metadata, file names, calendar invites, and invoices. It was Grant writing to Serena, "Amelia never understood the commercial value. We can make this real." It was Serena replying, "If we move fast before she files anything, the narrative will be yours." It was Elaine writing, "Your ex will not fight if people think she is jealous." It was a consultant asking whether Hart Foundation had approved use of the environmental report. It was Grant responding, "Family materials cleared." Family. That word again. People loved calling something family when they wanted to take it without asking. Amelia read the emails in Mara's office. She did not cry until she reached the one from Grant to Serena sent 2 days before the divorce hearing. Once the divorce is done, she will be too embarrassed to contest anything. Her father keeps her quiet. That is how those people operate. Those people. Her father keeps her quiet. Amelia stood and walked to the window. Mara waited. After a while, Amelia said, "He thought I was quiet because I was controlled." "Why were you quiet?" Amelia watched traffic move below. "Because I was tired of begging someone to respect what he was already using." Mara said nothing. That was a gift. The final hearing was set for early autumn. By then, Whitaker Development was bleeding. Grant had lost one bridge loan. 2 board advisors resigned. Serena was no longer listed on the company website. Elaine stopped posting. Amelia did not celebrate. She worked. She met with community leaders in Redwood Harbor. She assured the environmental team the project would continue under its original governance model. She revised the affordable housing language. She corrected the missing M in community. When she noticed the typo, she stared at the word for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was the first easy laugh in months. Richard heard it from his office and appeared in the doorway. "Should I be worried?" "No, I just fixed the typo that ruined Grant." Richard smiled. "Never underestimate small errors." "You taught me that." "I taught you to read before signing. You turned it into a personality." Amelia leaned back in her chair. "It saved me." Richard's expression softened. "You saved you." The final hearing drew more attention than Amelia wanted. That was the price of the lunch story going public. But this time, she was prepared. She wore gray. Mara wore black. Richard sat in the gallery again. Grant arrived without Serena. Elaine sat behind him, rigid and pale. His attorney looked like a man who had advised settlement and lost. Mara's presentation was clean. Timeline. Ownership. Access. Unauthorized use. Investor misrepresentation. Public attacks. Hallway incident. She did not call Grant a thief until the evidence had already done it for her. Grant testified. He said he had contributed ideas during the marriage. Mara asked him to identify one original file predating Amelia's. He could not. He said marriage made the project shared. Mara showed the foundation charter, grant documents, and development notes under Amelia's role. He said Amelia had never planned to commercialize the concept. Mara played his voice memo calling it her seaside charity village. He said he used that phrase affectionately. Mara raised one eyebrow. "Do you often describe your wife's professional work as charity village affectionately?" The judge looked at Grant. Grant looked down. Mara then displayed the lunch recording transcript. Serena's line. "I did not know you had found a sugar daddy." Amelia's reply. "Dad." Richard's statement. "You thought an insult was safe." Grant's attorney objected to relevance. Mara answered before the judge ruled. "It is relevant because the defendants publicly framed Ms. Hart as using family wealth to sabotage Mr. Whitaker, while privately seeking investment from that same family without disclosing the source of the materials they were pitching." The objection failed. Grant's shoulders lowered. It was small. But Amelia saw it. The moment a man realizes the room no longer responds to charm, he often mistakes gravity for cruelty. The judge ruled that Whitaker Development could not use, market, sell, or derive investment from the disputed materials. He ordered destruction or return of protected files. He ordered financial compensation for unauthorized use. He required written notice to every investor who had received the Whitaker landing deck. He also ordered Grant to publish a correction stating that Redwood Harbor originated with Amelia Hart and Hart Foundation before any Whitaker materials. The word correction sounded small. It cost Grant more than money. It cost him the story. Outside court, Grant waited near the steps. Mara walked slightly ahead, giving Amelia enough space to choose. Grant looked older. Not ruined. Just stripped of lighting. "Amelia," he said. She stopped. "What?" He looked toward the reporters at the bottom of the stairs. Can we speak privately? No. His mouth tightened. You got everything. No, I got back what was mine. You always had to win. Amelia studied him. For years, that sentence would have sent her into explanation. She would have reminded him of every time she stepped aside, softened credit, fixed problems, excused him, waited for him, forgave him. Now she did not want to give him her memory as free labor. Grant, if telling the truth feels like losing to you, that is not my problem. He flinched. Elaine appeared behind him. You humiliated my son. Amelia looked at her former mother-in-law. Elaine had once told her that a wife should never make a man feel dependent on her money. Then she asked Amelia to cover a family tax bill 2 weeks later. Your son humiliated himself when he stole work he did not understand. Elaine's face reddened. You sound just like your father. Richard stepped beside Amelia. Thank you. Elaine looked away first. Grant tried one last time. I loved you once. Amelia felt the words enter and fail to find the place where they used to work. Maybe, she said, but you loved access more. Then she walked down the courthouse steps with her father beside her and Mara behind her, and for the first time in months the cameras did not feel like danger. They felt like witnesses. The correction appeared on Whitaker Development's website 3 days later. Redwood Harbor was originated by Amelia Hart and Hart Foundation prior to any Whitaker Development materials. Previous investor communications regarding Whitaker Landing contained materials used without authorization. Whitaker Development has discontinued all use of those materials. The statement was dry. Beautifully dry. Amelia printed it. Not because she needed to frame it. Because one day, when the ache softened enough, she wanted to remember that truth did not always arrive with music. Sometimes it arrived as a paragraph written by a lawyer and posted by a man who hated every word. Serena disappeared from public view for several weeks. Then she resurfaced with a new profile photo and a caption about rebuilding from betrayal. Amelia did not respond. Mara sent a reminder letter about the non-disparagement terms. The caption came down. Grant tried to pitch another project the following winter. It failed quietly. Investors had memories. Consultants had group chats. City officials had files. Elaine told friends her son had been targeted by a powerful family. Some believed her. Most stopped inviting her to rooms where facts might enter. Redwood Harbor moved forward slowly, properly under Amelia's name. There were public hearings, environmental revisions, community objections, budget fights, design changes. No dramatic shortcut. No stolen deck. No false visionary man standing in front of her work. The first time Amelia stood before the Redwood Harbor Council herself, her hands shook behind the podium. She let them. Then she began. This project is not a luxury development wearing a public promise, she said. It is a public promise with housing, coastline repair, and local ownership built into its structure. She explained the plan in clear, patient language. She answered questions for 3 hours. She did not mention Grant. When the preliminary approval passed, Richard hugged her in the hallway. Proud of you, he said. Amelia closed her eyes for 1 second. Thank you for not saving me. Richard pulled back. What? You helped, but you did not take over. His face changed. He understood the difference. You were never a child who wanted rescue, he said. You wanted backup. That was exactly it. For years, Grant had mocked the closeness between Amelia and her father as dependence. But dependence was not having someone who stood beside you. Dependence was needing someone else's lie to feel important. The following spring, Amelia returned to the same restaurant where everything had broken open. She did not plan to. Richard invited her for lunch before a foundation meeting. For a moment, she considered suggesting somewhere else. Then she said yes. The hostess recognized them and looked nervous. Richard requested a table by the window. Not the corner table. Not that memory. Something brighter. They ordered soup, bread, and coffee. No champagne. No performance. Halfway through lunch, Amelia looked across the room. The corner table was occupied by two women in business suits reviewing a stack of plans. One pointed at a drawing. The other took notes. Amelia smiled. Richard noticed. "What?" "Nothing. I just like seeing women at that table with actual documents." Richard laughed. After lunch, while he signed the bill, Amelia walked to the front of the restaurant and paused near the place where she had once stood with a folder in her hand and humiliation waiting to be assigned to her. She could still hear Serena's voice if she tried. "Sugar daddy." She could still see Grant's small laugh. She could still feel the restaurant listening. But memory had changed. It no longer ended with the insult. It ended with her turning toward the man who had taught her to keep copies, read fine print, and never confuse a loud man with a strong one. Dad. One word had not saved her. It had revealed what had always been true. She came from somewhere. She had built something. She had records. She had a name. And the people who thought she was alone had only exposed how little they had ever cared to know her. That evening, Amelia went home to the apartment she bought after the divorce. It was smaller than the house she once shared with Grant. It was quieter, too. But the quiet did not feel like lack. It felt like clean space. On her desk sat the final Redwood Harbor approval packet, a vase of blue hydrangeas, and the leather folder she had carried into the restaurant that day. She opened the folder. Inside was a copy of the grant approval Richard had asked her to sign. Her signature was at the bottom. Amelia Hart. Not Mrs. Whitaker. Not Grant's wife. Not the bitter ex in someone else's headline. Amelia Hart. She ran one finger over the ink. Then she placed the document back in the folder and turned off the desk lamp. Grant had once told her leaving him would make her irrelevant. Serena had once laughed because she thought Amelia needed an older man to pay for lunch. Elaine had once said truth would come. For once, Elaine had been right. Truth came. It came with recordings. It came with metadata. It came with court orders. It came with a typo copied by a man too arrogant to check the work he stole. It came with a father quietly setting down an espresso cup while a mistress learned that mockery is safest only before the facts arrive. Amelia did not need to shout. She did not need to beg anyone to believe her. She only needed to let the record stand long enough for the room to understand. And when betrayal finally met consequences, one word had been enough to begin the fall. Dad. 2 weeks after the final order, Amelia received a package from Grant. It came to her apartment, not to Mara's office. That alone told her it was not a legal document. The box was small, wrapped in brown paper, and addressed in Grant's handwriting. For a moment, Amelia stood in the mailroom with the package in her hands and felt time fold backward. Grant used to leave notes on the kitchen counter in that same slanted script. Dinner at 8. Flight delayed. You looked beautiful tonight. Then later, the notes disappeared and became texts. Running late. Do not wait up. Serena needs me at the office. Handwriting had once felt intimate. Now it felt like trespassing. Amelia carried the package upstairs, placed it on the dining table, photographed it from every side, and called Mara. Do not open it yet, Mara said. I know. Is it ticking? Amelia paused. That was almost a joke. I contain multitudes. Put it in a clear bag if you have one. I will send a courier. You think it matters? I think people who ignore council boundaries rarely start with one violation. Mara was right. The courier picked it up within the hour. The next morning, Mara called. It is a photo album. Amelia sat down slowly. What kind? Marriage photos, some travel photos, a handwritten letter, no threats, but the delivery violates the communication protocol. Amelia looked at the wall across from her. She had removed all wedding photos from the apartment months earlier but memory did not need frames to appear. Read me the letter. Mara hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. Paper rustled. Mara began. Ames, I know everything has become legal language now, but before all that, we were real. I found these and remembered who we were before your father, your lawyers, and your need to control every outcome. I made mistakes, but you and I both know you shut me out long before Serena. I hope one day you can remember the man you loved instead of the villain your family needed me to become. Mara stopped. There is more, but it continues in that direction. Amelia closed her eyes. Before your father. Before your lawyers. Your need to control every outcome. Even in apology, Grant could not resist assigning her the weight of his choices. Send the violation notice, Amelia said. Already drafted. And the album? I can store it with the file. Amelia opened her eyes. No, scan the letter, keep the delivery records, return the album through counsel. You do not want it? No. There was a time when she would have kept it. She would have opened the photos at midnight and tried to find the exact moment when love became extraction. She would have compared Grant's smile in Italy to Grant's face in court. She would have hurt herself with evidence of happiness because some part of her believed pain became meaningful if she could trace its origin. Now she understood that not every memory deserved a trial. Some only deserved a boundary. Grant did not take the returned album well. He sent a message from a new number. You are so cold now. Amelia forwarded it to Mara. Then another. Your father turned you into this. Forwarded. Then another. Serena was right about you. Forwarded. Mara filed a motion to enforce communication limits. At the hearing, Grant's attorney argued that a photo album was a harmless emotional gesture. Mara submitted the letter. She highlighted the phrases blaming Amelia's father, lawyers, and control. Then she submitted the new messages. The judge looked at Grant. Mr. Whitaker, the court's order is not a suggestion. If you need to communicate, you do so through counsel. Grant's jaw tightened. I was trying to resolve things personally. The court has seen your version of personal resolution. The judge issued a warning and awarded fees. It was not dramatic. But Grant hated it. He hated small public corrections more than large private consequences. That became useful. Because 2 days later, he made another mistake. He appeared on a regional business podcast with a host who liked fallen founders and disliked fact-checking. Grant did not name Amelia directly, but he did not need to. He spoke about legacy money interfering with innovation. He spoke about ex-spouses who could not separate personal rejection from business. He spoke about having a project taken away after years of vision work. Then the host asked about the rumor that he accidentally pitched his ex-wife's father. Grant laughed. Let's just say some families hide their power until it is useful. Amelia listened to the clip in Mara's office. Mara stopped the audio there. We can move. Defamation? Violation of the order at minimum, also the correction agreement. He agreed not to represent the project as his vision. Amelia looked at the paused audio file. He cannot stop. No, Mara said. People who survive on narrative often experience silence as death. What does that make me? Someone who has documents. Amelia laughed softly. They filed. This time, the court did not only warn Grant. The judge imposed additional fees, expanded the non-disparagement restrictions tied to the settlement, and ordered him to publish a specific correction on the same podcast feed. The correction was painful in its precision. Whitaker Development did not originate Redwood Harbor. I did not have ownership rights to the materials I presented as Whitaker Landing. My prior comments suggesting the project was taken from me were inaccurate. Grant's voice reading it sounded flat, almost metallic. Amelia did not enjoy hearing it. She saved the audio anyway. Not for revenge. For completion. Serena returned to the story in a quieter way. 1 month after the correction, Amelia received a call from a woman named Dana Vale, Serena's older sister. Amelia almost declined. Then Dana left a voicemail. Miss Hart, I am not calling to defend Serena. I am calling because I think you should know about the charity invoices. Amelia sent the voicemail to Mara. Mara arranged a call with Dana present and recorded. Dana was careful. She said Serena had been staying with her after leaving Grant. She said Serena was terrified of being sued further. She said Grant had asked Serena to route certain payments through a nonprofit account Serena once managed. Amelia listened with a pen in her hand. What nonprofit? Harbor Youth Arts. Amelia wrote it down. Mara's voice sharpened. What payments? Design consulting, community outreach, things for Whitaker Landing. Amelia looked at Mara across the conference table. Harbor Youth Arts had been one of the community partners in the original Redwood Harbor Plan. The nonprofit served children in the coastal district. If Grant had used their name or accounts, the damage was no longer only to Amelia. It was to a community group that trusted the project. Dana continued. Serena says Grant told her it was normal to pre-bill community engagement. She signed things. I do not know how bad it is, but she keeps saying if Amelia looks there, I am done. Mara asked for documents. Dana sent 3 invoices, 2 email threads, and 1 photo of a check request. Within days, the review widened again. Grant had used Harbor Youth Arts as a credibility marker in investor materials. He had represented that the nonprofit had committed to Whitaker Landing. It had not. He had listed outreach invoices. The invoices were not authorized by the nonprofit's board. Serena had prepared them. Grant had approved them. Money had not all moved, but the attempt was clear enough. This time, Amelia was angry in a cleaner way. The first betrayal had been personal. The stolen project had been professional. This reached into the community she had promised to protect. At the next Redwood Harbor advisory meeting, she disclosed the issue to the nonprofit's director, a woman named Jo Alvarez. Jo listened with both hands folded on the table. She had worked with teenagers for 20 years and had the kind of calm that came from watching adults disappoint children too often. When Amelia finished, Jo said, "Did any money leave our account?" "We do not believe so." "Did investors see our name?" "Yes." Jo's mouth tightened. "Then we need a public correction too." "I agree. And I want Serena removed from any future community-facing work in this district." "Already done." Jo looked at Amelia for a long moment. I wondered whether this project would survive the scandal. Amelia sat very still. And now? Now I wonder whether it needed the scandal to show us who was serious. The correction to Harbor Youth Arts became the final thread that unraveled Grant's remaining credibility. Investors could forgive ambition. Some could forgive divorce drama. Fewer could forgive copied decks. Almost none wanted to be associated with misrepresented nonprofit commitments involving children. Grant's second project died before it reached a pitch room. Serena signed a separate settlement with Harbor Youth Arts and agreed to volunteer hours under supervision, though Jo insisted she not work directly with the children. Elaine called it persecution in private, but she no longer posted publicly. Public statements had become expensive. Amelia kept working. That was the part no one saw in the headlines. The project still needed permits. The shoreline model had to be revised after new flood data arrived. The affordable units needed financing that did not depend on a luxury developer swallowing the plan whole. The community board wanted more local hiring commitments. Every promise had to become a clause, every clause had to become funding, every funding source had to survive review. This was the work Grant had never understood. He thought Vision was standing in front of a beautiful rendering and speaking as if the future had already agreed. Amelia knew Vision was 1,000 unglamorous decisions made after everyone stopped clapping. One evening, she stayed late at the foundation office with Jo and 2 planners, working through a revised community ownership model. The conference room smelled like cold coffee and marker ink. Rain moved against the windows. Jo looked at Amelia over a stack of papers. "Do you ever get tired of being the calm one?" Amelia laughed once. "Constantly." You hide it well. That is not always a compliment. Joe leaned back. No, but I meant it as respect, not a demand. Amelia appreciated the distinction. She had spent years with people who praised her steadiness only because it made her easier to exploit. Grant loved that she handled things. Elaine loved that she hosted without complaint. Serena loved that she could provoke Amelia and still rely on her not to make a scene. Mara, Joe, Richard, and the people Amelia trusted now did not ask calmness to replace truth. They let it carry truth. That was different. In December, Hart Foundation held a public forum in Redwood Harbor. The auditorium was full. Residents wanted details. Some were supportive. Some were skeptical. Some were angry because they had heard the word development too many times from people who arrived with brochures and left with profit. Amelia took the stage without a flashy deck. She brought maps, timelines, commitments, and a plain explanation of what had changed after the Whitaker dispute. Why should we trust this project, one man asked, when the last guy tried to use our community like a sales pitch? Amelia looked at him. The room waited. She could have distanced herself from Grant completely. She could have said he was not part of the foundation. She could have buried the answer under legal language. Instead, she said, "You should not trust a project because of a speech. You should trust it when the documents match the promises and when the people making decisions can be held accountable." The room quieted. That is why every major commitment will be published. That is why Harbor Youth Arts and other community partners will have review rights. That is why local hiring, housing affordability, coastline protections, and ownership terms will be written before ceremonial announcements happen. Joe nodded from the front row. The man who asked the question sat down slowly. Not convinced. But listening. That was enough for the first night. After the forum, a young reporter approached. "Miss Hart, do you think your ex-husband's actions made this harder?" Amelia almost smiled. "Yes." "Do you resent him for that?" "This project is bigger than my resentment." "But do you?" Amelia looked toward the auditorium where Joe was speaking with residents near the maps. "I resent the harm. I do not organize my life around him anymore." The reporter wrote that down. The quote appeared the next day. It was the first article Amelia did not hate. Months passed. Grant faded from the center of the story, which was the one consequence he seemed least able to bear. His company downsized. His office moved from a downtown suite to a shared floor near the freeway. His social media became motivational quotes and photographs from conferences where he was no longer listed as a speaker. Serena moved out of the city. Elaine sold the family house and told people she wanted less maintenance. Amelia heard these things through others. She did not seek them. Sometimes satisfaction arrived uninvited. She let it pass through without building a room for it. On the day Redwood Harbor received final preliminary approval, Richard brought Amelia back to the restaurant again. This time, Joe came too. Mara joined them late, carrying a file bag and wearing the expression of someone who had won 3 arguments before lunch. They sat at the same corner table where Grant and Serena had once sat. Amelia hesitated before taking the chair. Richard noticed. "We can move." Amelia looked at the white tablecloth, the silverware, the window, the chair where Serena had laughed. "No." She sat. The restaurant did not collapse. Memory did not win. Joe raised her glass of sparkling water. To documents matching promises. Mara lifted her coffee. To typos. Richard lifted his wine. To my daughter. Amelia felt her throat tighten. Not from pain this time. From being seen without being used. She raised her glass. To backup, not rescue. They drank. Halfway through lunch, the waiter brought dessert they had not ordered. "From the house," he said. Amelia recognized him then. He had been near the wine station the day Serena made the sugar daddy comment. He smiled politely. "It is good to see you here again, Miss Hart." The sentence was simple. It almost undid her. After lunch, Amelia stood outside under the same awning where her hands had shaken months before. This time, the air was warm. Richard's driver waited by the curb. Mara checked her messages. Joe argued cheerfully with a planner on the phone. Amelia looked through the restaurant window. The corner table gleamed in the sunlight. It was just a table now. Not a courtroom. Not a wound. Just a table where arrogant people had once misjudged a quiet woman and left evidence behind. Richard joined her. "You are thinking very loudly." "I was thinking that I used to believe dignity meant not correcting people. And now? Now I think dignity means knowing when the correction protects more than pride." Richard nodded. "That is a hard lesson. Expensive too. Most useful lessons are." Amelia looked at him. "I hated that she called you that." "Sugar daddy?" She winced. Richard smiled. "I have been called worse by better people." "Dad." "I know, but listen to me." He turned toward her fully. "The insult was not about me. It was about making you feel ashamed for having support. Do not let people who misuse connection convince you that connection itself is dirty." Amelia absorbed that. Support had become complicated after Grant. She had worried every time Richard helped that people would say she was hiding behind him. She had worried every time Mara spoke that people would say she could not fight alone. She had worried every time Joe stood beside her that people would say she was collecting allies for performance. But perhaps isolation was exactly what people like Grant wanted. A woman alone was easier to rename. Bitter. Jealous. Unstable. Cold. A woman with records and witnesses was harder to erase. "I am glad you were at that table," Amelia said. Richard's eyes softened. "So am I." "Even though it ruined your lunch?" "My lunch was brief. Their consequences were longer." Amelia laughed. That became the line she remembered. Not Serena's insult. Not Grant's laugh. Her father's dry, steady truth. My lunch was brief. Their consequences were longer. That night, Amelia returned home with the dessert box from the restaurant, the final approval packet, and a strange sense of quiet victory that did not need an audience. She placed the approval packet on her desk beside the framed first map of Redwood Harbor. The old typo was visible in the corner because she had kept that draft too. Community. She touched the page. One missing letter had helped expose a stolen future. One word at lunch had exposed a false story. Dad. Records did not always look powerful when they were created. Sometimes they looked like boring backups, dated drafts, saved voicemails, screenshots taken with shaking hands, or typos nobody bothered to fix. But when lies entered polished rooms wearing expensive suits, records stood up quietly and named them. Amelia made tea, changed into soft clothes, and sat by the window while the city lights came on. Her phone was silent. No Grant. No Serena. No Elaine. No messages demanding that she explain, soften, forgive, disappear, or make someone else's humiliation easier to survive. The silence did not feel lonely. It felt like ownership. Her work. Her name. Her father. Her future. No longer hidden so that a man could feel self-made while standing on everything she built. The next morning, Amelia wrote one sentence on a card and placed it inside the Redwood Harbor file. Truth does not need to shout when the documents are awake. She almost threw it away because it sounded dramatic. Then she kept it. After everything, she had earned a little drama in private. The real groundbreaking for Redwood Harbor happened on a windy morning the following year. It was not glamorous. The sky was overcast. The ceremonial shovels kept sinking awkwardly into damp soil. One microphone failed before the first speaker finished. Children from Harbor Youth Arts sat in the front row wearing jackets too thin for the wind, passing granola bars back and forth with the seriousness of people managing supplies during a historic event. Amelia stood behind the temporary stage and watched volunteers tape down a loose cable. This was what survival looked like after the headlines moved on. Not revenge. Logistics. Joe stood beside her with a clipboard. You ready? Amelia looked toward the crowd. Residents. City officials. Foundation staff. Architects. Environmental consultants. Reporters who had once chased the sugar daddy angle and now had to write about shoreline restoration, affordable housing covenants, and community ownership rights. Richard stood near the side aisle, hands in his coat pockets, speaking with an older fisherman who had argued against the project at 3 public meetings before finally joining the advisory board. Mara was there too, not as counsel that morning but as a friend, though she still carried a file bag because some habits were spiritual. Amelia's hands were cold. They did not shake. I am ready, she said. When she stepped onto the stage, the applause was polite at first. Then the youth arts kids began clapping harder because Joe had clearly threatened them with nothing except disappointment, which was worse. Amelia laughed softly into the microphone. Thank you, she said. I promise to be brief because the wind has already made its opinion known. A small ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. She looked down at her notes. For once, she did not need many. This project began as a question, she said. Could coastal protection, housing stability, local jobs, and community ownership be designed together instead of traded against each other? She looked toward the residents. The first answer was imperfect. The second was better. The version we begin today exists because people in this community insisted that promises be written clearly enough to survive the people making them. Joe nodded once. Amelia continued. That matters to me, not only as a project lead, but as someone who has learned the hard way that a promise without a record can become a performance. We are not here to perform commitment. We are here to build it, audit it, publish it, and live with it. The wind moved through the microphone. For a second, the sound was rough. Then it steadied. Redwood Harbor belongs to everyone who refused to let the easiest story become the final one. She did not mention Grant. She did not have to. The absence of his name was its own correction. After the ceremony, a reporter asked if the project felt like personal vindication. Amelia looked toward the children taking pictures with the ceremonial shovels. Personal vindication is too small for this, she said. Then what does it feel like? Amelia thought of the restaurant, the courtroom, the copied typo, the folder on her desk, and the moment Grant looked at her as if her silence had betrayed him by becoming evidence. It feels like returning stolen ground to the map. The reporter wrote that down slowly. Later, Richard walked with her along the marked construction boundary. The ground was uneven, and he offered his arm. She took it. Not because she needed rescue. Because accepting support no longer felt like surrender. You did well, he said. You always say that. You are frequently impressive. That is such a dad answer. I have legal standing. Amelia laughed, and the sound moved easily into the wind. At the far edge of the site, a temporary sign displayed the project's name. Redwood Harbor Community Resilience District. Below it, in smaller text, were the names of the partners. Hart Foundation. Harbor Youth Arts. City Coastal Office. Local Housing Trust. No Whitaker. No borrowed vision. No man standing in front of a stolen deck and calling it leadership. Amelia took a photograph. She saved it to the same archive that held the old evidence, but in a new folder. Not proof. Progress. That evening, she received one final message from an unknown number. Saw the news. You always knew how to make yourself look noble. No signature. It did not need one. Grant's bitterness had a familiar shape. Amelia stared at the message for a moment. Then she did something she had not been able to do a year earlier. She deleted it without taking a screenshot. Not because records no longer mattered. Because not every thrown stone deserved a place in the archive. The case was over. The project was protected. The boundary was real. She set the phone face down and opened the window. Outside, the city moved through evening, indifferent and alive. For a long time, Amelia had believed closure would arrive as a final judgment, a public apology, a perfect sentence that made every witness understand exactly what she had endured. But closure was quieter. It was sitting in her own home and realizing she did not need to prove the message was cruel. It was knowing she could preserve evidence when necessary and release noise when she chose. It was understanding that her father being there that day had not made her weak. It had made the lie shorter. The next week, she visited the Foundation archive to store the original Redwood Harbor documents. The archivist, a meticulous woman named June, handed her a cotton glove and a pencil. No pens near originals. Amelia smiled. Understood. They labeled the box together. Redwood Harbor Initiative, Originating Files, Amelia Hart. June typed the entry into the catalog. When Amelia saw her name appear on the archive screen, something inside her settled. Court orders mattered. Public corrections mattered. Money mattered. But archives had their own power. They said this existed. They said this began here. They said someone might lie later, but the record was waiting. Amelia left the building just before sunset. Richard was not waiting outside. Mara was not beside her. Joe was not calling. For once, no one was needed in the moment. She walked alone down the front steps with the light on her face and her name safe in the record behind her. Alone did not mean abandoned. Alone meant unaccompanied by people who made love feel like a debt. She stopped at the corner and looked back at the archive windows. The woman Serena mocked at lunch had not been a discarded ex-wife clinging to an older man. She had been a daughter delivering grant papers. A founder protecting her work. A woman with enough discipline to let an insult finish because the truth was sitting at the table. And maybe that was the part Grant had never understood. Amelia's power had never been only her father's name, her family's money, or the lawyers who answered when she called. It was her ability to say one word and let everyone else realize they had built their lie in the wrong room. "Dad?"